cup, one like cowgirls wore to dance in until the bar closed, one that would never be worn to work cattle. Dan relaxed as he stared down at the boot. County Road 111 was mostly traveled by locals, and none of the ranch folks wore fancy footwear like this.
"It's a mystery,"
he said aloud. Dan was fully aware that he was talking to himself, but then who was around to object? He picked up the boot and walked back to his car. If someone had tossed it out, which wasn't likely, it probably wouldn't have been standing straight up on the center line. No one would have thrown away just one, even if they hated wearing them. A pair like this probably cost $500 or more. By the car light, he examined his find. Deep blue, like the sky turned just before it rained. The sole was worn, no other scrapes. Whoever wore this never shoved it into a stirrup. Dan put the boot in the passenger seat and pushed the car into gear.
"Well, pretty lady,"
he said with a laugh,
"how about riding along with me tonight?"
Any woman who wore a boot like this one would show it off. She'd have on tight jeans tucked into the top. She'd be outgoing, maybe wild. She'd laugh easy and probably yell when she argued. She'd take big gulps of life. That kind of woman would never be attracted to him. Dan was as solid as the canyon walls, probably borderline boring if he thought about it. And as his daughter often reminded him, predictable. Dan never allowed himself to daydream. He was always serious, a man who was his job, not one who just wore the uniform. But tonight, cloudy, starless skies made the world seem more fantasy than real, and the rich blue leather sparkled in the dashboard lights.
"I guess I better start looking for Cinderella, because some cowgirl princess has lost her slipper."
He remembered how Lauren was always telling him he needed to go out now and then. Maybe he could text her a picture of the boot and tell her he'd made the first step. Lauren had probably meant he should date one of the church ladies who asked him for favors, such as judging the jams competitions for charity, or invited him to the Wednesday morning breakfast because they needed more men. His daughter had not meant for him to step out with the kind of woman who'd wear a rhinestone boot. It was almost 1 o'clock when the sheriff pulled into the Two-Step Saloon's dirt parking lot. The bar was outside the city limits of Crossroads, but Dan swore he could hear the bass beating some nights from his office a few miles away. Most Friday nights, he would have already had at least one call from the bartender before now. But since the Nowhere Club opened 30 miles south of Crossroads, business had dropped off along with arrests in Dan's county. Grabbing the boot, Dan walked into the Two-Step. Maybe if the place wasn't too loud or the folks too drunk, someone would remember seeing a lady wearing blue boots. He relaxed. The main room was only half full, and most of the crowd looked far more interested in talking than fighting. Ike Perez, the owner, had put in a big screen TV. If a game wasn't on, he played reruns. The drunks didn't seem to care. They cheered and bet as if they hadn't seen the game before. "Evening, Sheriff," the bartender said as she reached for a cup and the coffee pot. "Wondered if you'd make it in tonight." Dan stood at the corner of the bar, his back almost touching the wall. It was the only spot in the room where he could see the whole place.
"Evening, Kimmy."
The bartender might have been in AA for 10 years, but she was still working making drinks. She reminded Dan of an old bull rider who walked among rough stock on the night before a rodeo. Kimmy might not take the ride anymore, but she stayed near the noise and the excitement. When he set the fancy boot next to his cup, Kimmy winked at him. "If that's your date..."